Tonight, we're uncorking a story that's equal parts audacious heist, comedy of errors, and a reminder that even the most carefully plotted crime can fall apart faster than a cheap cork. It happened on a quiet Thanksgiving day in Seattle when two ordinary plumbers decided the holiday was the perfect time to steal more than $600,000 worth of the world's finest wine and nearly blow up an entire city block trying to cover their tracks. Before we slip into tonight's tale, I want to take a moment to thank you, our listeners, for being here with us in the dark. If you're loving true crime sleep stories, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. It helps us reach more listeners and keep these haunting tales coming your way. And if you'd like to go a step further, you can become a Patreon member at patreon.com/Kelly Brink. There, you'll get ad-free episodes and exclusive bonus content to feed your true crime curiosity. Now, we're going to hear briefly from our sponsors before we dive into your uninterrupted story for tonight. We'll be right back after this. Welcome back to True Crime Sleep Stories. Now, settle in, get comfy. Maybe pour yourself a glass of something red and velvety, legally acquired, of course, because tonight we're stepping into a climate-controlled warehouse in Seattle where the air smells faintly of oak and money, and two men are about to learn that crime is a lot harder than plumbing. It was Thanksgiving Day, 2013. While most of Seattle was gathered around turkey and football, the industrial SoDo neighborhood south of downtown was deserted. Perfect, thought Samuel Harris and Luke Thiesing. The 35 and 36-year-old plumbers had been watching the Eskin Wine and Spirits storage facility for weeks. Inside its thick walls were hundreds of private, temperature-controlled lockers where collectors stored bottles worth more than most people's cars. Harris, the planner of the pair, even kept a spiral notebook labeled in his own handwriting, "The Plan." They had cased the building by renting their own locker a month earlier. They knew where the cameras were. They knew the motion sensors blinked red when armed. They knew the holiday would keep almost everyone away. And they had shopped at Lowe's for everything they needed: black spray paint, heavy gloves, plastic sheeting, and tools strong enough to cut through drywall. Just after dusk, two white vans eased into the loading area. The men parked them deliberately, angling the vehicles to block the exterior camera's view of the door they planned to use. Then, dressed in the dark clothes and masks, they slipped inside. The first hour was meticulous. They draped black plastic over motion detectors. They climbed ladders and sprayed flat black paint across every security lens they could find. Most went dark. One, high in a forgotten corner, did not. But they never noticed. With the building blinded, they went to work. Using a saw, they cut neat rectangles through the sheetrock walls that separated the private lockers. One by one, they stepped through the holes like burglars walking through wardrobes into someone else's Narnia, except this Narnia smelled of Bordeaux and Burgundy and carried price tags that could make a sommelier weep. They weren't random. They moved with purpose, checking labels, pulling specific cases: rare Napa cult Cabernets, first-growth Bordeaux, a few precious bottles of Quilceda Creek and Corliss from Washington State. 200 cases in total worth roughly $648,000. They carried them out box by box, stacking them in the vans like they were loading a very expensive moving truck. It took 13 hours, 9 separate trips shuttling wine to a warehouse they had rented less than a mile away. By the time the sky began to brighten with early morning, both men were exhausted, sweaty, and probably tasting phantom notes of tannins in the air. But they weren't finished. Harris, the one who had red printouts titled "How to Commit the Perfect Crime" and "Is it accidental fire or arson?" decided the building needed to disappear. So he climbed a ladder one last time, took a pair of heavy cutters, and sliced into the natural gas lines running across the ceiling. He tampered with a pilot light, fully expecting the whole place to erupt in a fireball that would erase every trace of their night's work. They finished loading the last of the wine into the 2 white vans they'd been using all night. The plan had been simple. Once the vans were full, they'd drive straight to the rented warehouse, unload, come back for a final sweep if needed, then disappear before dawn. They locked the warehouse door behind them, pulled off their masks, and walked briskly toward the loading area where they'd left the vans parked hours earlier, angled perfectly to shield the entrance from the exterior cameras. The vans were gone. In the dim glow of the streetlights, all that remained were 2 fresh tow warning signs and the faint scuff marks of tires being hooked and dragged away. Somewhere in their month of planning, neither man had noticed that the south side of the building fell inside Seattle's weekly no parking zone for street cleaning, holiday or no holiday. The city's tow trucks had come and gone while Harris and Thiesing were inside cutting drywall and hauling cases. Their getaway vehicles, now brimming with over $500,000 in stolen wine, were sitting in an impound lot a few miles away, waiting for a clerk to open in the morning. Panic rippled between them. They still had dozens of cases left inside the warehouse they'd rented less than a mile away, and the sky was already beginning to pale. Harris made the call. They sprinted the short distance to where he had parked his personal vehicle earlier that night, a black Cadillac Escalade he'd left legally on a side street just in case they needed a backup. They raced back, loaded as many remaining cases as the SUV could hold, then drove out of the complex. Because the vans were no longer blocking the sightline, the one exterior camera they'd never spotted now had an unobstructed view of the Escalade's license plate and the 2 exhausted, unmasked men behind the wheel as they sped past in the gray pre-dawn light. The next morning, a building manager arrived early to check on something unrelated. He smelled gas. A lot of gas. He called 911. Firefighters shut off the lines and realized the place had been ransacked. When Esquine's owner, Chuck Lefebvre, arrived, he stared at the holes in the walls and the empty lockers and felt sick. His own daughter had lost bottles she was saving for her son's 21st birthday. Other customers had lost irreplaceable collections built over decades. But that one unsprayed camera had recorded everything. Chuck recognized one of the figures on the grainy footage, Samuel Harris, the plumber who had rented a locker the month before. Detectives pulled the rental paperwork. Harris had helpfully written his real home address on the form. When police searched Harris's Escalade and house, they found the mother lode, the spiral notebook titled the plan, the Lowe's receipt still in a pocket, the printed articles about committing perfect crimes and starting accidental fires. They even found an empty champagne bottle he'd apparently opened to celebrate too early. A day later, officers served a warrant at the second warehouse. Inside, in a temperature-controlled room, sat almost all 200 cases, neatly stacked, waiting for buyers who would never come. Chuck Lefebvre arrived to identify the wine and admitted he was shaking with relief. Detectives also discovered Harris had pulled a similar job earlier that year in San Francisco, stealing $250,000 worth of wine from a client who had hired him to build a custom cellar. Some of that wine had already been sold through a Bay Area consultant who thought he was getting a great deal. In the end, both men saw the writing on the wall, or perhaps the spray paint on the cameras, and pleaded guilty in King County Superior Court. Samuel Harris, the mastermind behind the plan, drew the heavier sentence, 9 years behind bars, accounting for the attempted arson and his prior wine theft. Luke Thiesing, his accomplice, got 5 years for his role in the burglary and thefts. The stolen wine emerged unscathed from the ordeal, miraculously spared by the rented warehouse's steady temperatures, even through Seattle's biting post-Thanksgiving chill. Detectives photographed every bottle, cataloged them, and reunited them with their grateful owners, from jilted collectors to Chuck Lefebvre's own daughter, whose cherished 2005 Bordeaux finally made its way back home. And that is the tale of the Thanksgiving wine heist, a tale so audacious it deserves its own holiday Netflix special. Two seasoned plumbers, masters at unclogging life's messes, felled by a humble tow truck, one pesky overlooked lens, and sheer bad luck. As for Harris and Thiesing themselves, the trail goes intriguingly cold after their convictions. There's scant information to be found online about their lives post-sentencing. No updates on parole hearings, no whispers of new ventures. Just the echo of those 2013 headlines fading into the digital ether. With good behavior, Thiesing likely walked free around 2018 and Harris by 2022 at the latest. One can't help but wonder, this Thanksgiving as the rest of us gather around the table with our lawfully sourced pours, are they out there somewhere, raising a discreet glass to their hard-won freedom, toasting the absurdity of it all, or perhaps vowing to stick to fixing pipes from here on out? We may never know for sure, but in the quiet corners of true crime lore, it's a delicious little mystery all its own. The warehouse in SoDo hums on, its gas lines mended, its cameras now vigilant sentinels with fresh anti-vandal tech. The wine graces shelves and cellars once more, aging gracefully into stories told around the table. And every November, the folks at Eskin probably lift a flute or a tumbler to those small, improbable mercies. The tow truck driver who clocked in early, the camera that blinked on in the nick of time, the gas that whispered warnings instead of roaring into flames. Thank you for sharing this shadowy evening with us, letting these real-life twists lull you or linger in your thoughts. Whether this one carried you gently into dreams or kept the embers of curiosity flickering late, I'm deeply grateful you're here. From all of us at True Crime Sleep Stories, we're wishing you a Thanksgiving wrapped in warmth, free of any crime, and brimming with the simple joy of good company and better stories. Sweet dreams, and until next time, stay curious and keep those cellars locked. True Crime Sleep Stories is hosted and created by Kelly Brink, produced with the support of our dedicated team. Subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to help us keep telling these haunting tales. Visit patreon.com/kellybrink for exclusive content and to join our community. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet you in the shadows next time. Until then, stay safe out there and lock your doors. Good night.